Welcome back to another episode of Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Carter Bond, joined today with Lucas Harkins and Rocco Miller. Fellas, this is our last episode before the month turns March. Rocco, I'll start with you, man. How you doing? I know you were at some games this week.
I'm good. I saw one really important one between St. Mary's and Santa Clara. St. Mary's went on to win their 24th game in a row at home. Place was absolutely electric. It's going to be even crazier tomorrow with them hosting the Bulldogs of Gonzaga, but I think it was a reminder probably for the rest of the country. I think we're very aware of the Gales and their power out here in the West, but the rest of the country scrutinizing the resume, how unbelievably tough they are to beat, especially in their building. We call them the Mountains of Moraga, the 7-footers, totally taking over the game. About 4 minutes left in the first half, and then the rest of the way, all second half, really flipped the game with a 19-2 run. And unfortunately for Santa Clara, it's a missed opportunity to get the number 2 seed. They're going to be locked into the 3 seed now because there's no mathematical path for them to pass St. Mary's in the net, which is the tiebreaker, should St. Mary's lose to Gonzaga tomorrow. And we'll be talking a lot about Santa Clara due to that. They're close to the bubble once again. For St. Mary's, I think it gives everybody else across the country maybe a sigh of relief that they certainly belong. And now the conversation for the Gales shifts to more of a seeding conversation. So that was a great game, great environment, and it's been a good week. Very busy, Carter.
Very busy this time of year. Conference tournament starting next week. Lucas, how you doing, man? You get ready for March?
Doing well. Always getting ready for March. I mean, haven't been at as much games as Rocco of late. For me locally, Butler was on the road this week, so I've actually just been taking in the hoops from home, double screening, watching what we can get in. Lots of action, both from the top of the seed list all the way down to the bottom of the bubble. Lots of hoops are going on, and we're reaching crunch time.
I love it. Well, let's get right into it. Let's start off, Rocco. Who was the biggest bracket winner of the week for you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to use this section to just highlight sorry, Carter, but I got to do it. The UCF Knights. I think for them, we left off the show on Monday. If you rewind it to Monday's episode, go watch the end and ignore what I said because I think one of the last things I said on the show was I was nervous about UCF's chances to get in, and I wasn't sold that they were going to be able to get to the finish line. A lot of different types of results throughout the year, but the way they came out in Provo, I think being in Utah for 4 or 5 days really helped. I'm used to the old mindset of both WCC for BYU and Pac-12 for Utah, how tough that trip is. But nowadays in the Big 12, when a team from that far away comes in, they get to hang out, be in the state for a good week almost, and really adjust. I think that helped the Knights substantially. They certainly had their legs. There was no initial acclimation to the altitude that you see in a lot of those types of games historically. And, they have great kids, really great kids. I got to cover Thamos Folks for years, both at Louisiana and at Milwaukee. Michael Stillwell is such an underrated player and an elite rebounder and an even better person. He's just a first-class guy that's worked for everything he's gotten. Really cool to see him in the Big 12 and succeeding. And for UCF as a school, it's a huge deal because barring a miracle, they're in the tournament now. Almost, I hate the word lock, but they've earned it. And for the school, it's only going to be the second time in history that they'll land inside the bubble. The only other time, of course, 2019, the year when Coach Dawkins' son had the unfortunate shot lip out against Duke. Otherwise, they would have had one of the biggest upsets in second-round history when UCF played Duke that year. So congratulations to the Knights. It's a game for them. They'll never forget probably because that is the game that stamps their ticket to the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I thought BYU maybe should have been in the next segment, but that's a different story, if we're being honest. And also, shout out Johnny Dawkins and the UCF Knights. It's hard not to root for him and how awesome the story is this season. And like you said, almost being a borderline lock going into March after their win in Provo. Unfortunately, came at the expense of my BYU Cougars. Lucas, who is your biggest bracket winner of the week?
Well, I'll move much higher to the top of the board, and I'll say UConn. As far as their candidacy for the number 1 seed line, I think a lot of what we've talked about to this point is their resume speaks volumes of being a number 1 seed, but their predictive metrics were a little bit further behind a lot of those teams that were contending for the line. They're still a little behind in that category, but a 32-point win at home over St. John's not only is a revenge win for them, but also is the kind of one that really solidifies their stance as my fourth number one seed going forward. Also at the top, Florida with another nice result. They continue to roll. They've won, I think, 8 straight now. They win at Texas. They're back in the mix to be a 2 seed and really strongly in contention on that line. Going towards the bubble, sticking in the SEC, Missouri obviously has a really big result. They win at home against Tennessee. You add a home result over Tennessee to having already beaten Vanderbilt at home, Florida at home, Kentucky on the road, Texas A&M on the road. Missouri's now got a collection of wins that, even with a little bit lower metrics, that are steadily rising down the stretch here. But that collection of wins is going to be really hard to keep out of the field if they continue to play well here down the stretch.
Let's flip over to the loser side. Rocco, who's your biggest loser of the bracket this week?
Well, given the schedule and the circumstances, I have to say St. Louis because they go to Dayton and they didn't play well. It wasn't a close loss really, and for the second straight week, they've now dropped a road game in the league. It's a hard league. Like I don't think it's a bad loss per se. In fact, the next morning, Dayton jumped up to a quad 1 loss. And obviously it's a rivalry. All that factors in. I was at the first game in St. Louis. That was awesome. And I really do think long-term this team's gearing up for a potential run. I think the bad news is, just being a basketball fan in the bracket, you never want to be in an 8-9 game. And you certainly, if you can help it, try to want to avoid the 7-10 game as well. Well, now the Billikens slot into an 8-9 situation. And there's not a lot of time or opportunities left to remedy that, to try to get back up to like the 6 line, because the road game at George Mason's really the only big game left, and it's not that big of a game compared to all the teams that are surrounding them from the Big Ten, the ACC, et cetera. And so St. Louis probably can't undo and replenish what the harm that they took in these last 2 losses. So it's a tough break for them because now they'll probably need a massive second round upset should they win their opening game in the NCAA tournament. And so I'm just looking at it from that point of view. But you look at it this way: if you want to get to the Final Four, you got to beat good teams at some point. You might as well just do it earlier, right?
Yeah, get them when they least expect it, maybe in the round of 32. Lucas, who's your biggest loser of the week?
Yeah, I think it's Indiana losing at home to Northwestern. I think the road losses they took before that at Illinois and Purdue, not just predictable, but like excusable. Obviously games they would have liked to win given they've had, such a poor record in quality games this season. But you drop the home one to Northwestern. They fall to 4-11 against the upper 2 quadrants. They're still 2-10 against quadrant 1. There's metrics that are on their side still. I think they're a team that, is probably hinging in or out right now ahead of a really important closing schedule where they get Michigan State at home and they have a huge bubble battle at Ohio State in their finale. But Indiana, that's the loss they probably couldn't have taken in that 3-game stretch where they lost all 3. Additionally, a road loss at Oklahoma is not like particularly damaging, but it is when it's your 13th loss of the season, Auburn. They've now lost 6 of their last 7. They're down to 15-13 overall. I'm sure they're a team we'll talk about throughout the show, as well as Indiana, but 2 teams that took big losses here on the cut line that already had relatively poor records, either overall or in quality games.
Yeah, brutal stretch for both of those teams right there. Let's move on. Let's not talk about the losers anymore. Let's talk about the best teams in this sport right now. Let's talk about the number 1 seeds right now. Our consensus number 1 seeds currently here on Fielding the 68. We have Duke as the number 1 overall, and then Michigan, Arizona, no changes there, and then UConn is the 4th number 1 overall here. Rocco, I'll start with you. What jumps out to you right here?
Well, of course, we're staying pat, and like Lucas called out, UConn further cemented themselves with the domination of St. John's, basically split the series there and got control of the Big East race as well. I think that's important as both, the 3 that you're looking at above UConn, Arizona, Michigan, and Duke, are all forecasted to win their conferences. So if there's any team like an Iowa State or perhaps a Florida, we'll talk about them in a little bit, that sneaks up on it, you have a league championship to go toe-to-toe with a team like a Florida, or maybe Iowa State if they can shock Arizona later next week. But I think that's the right 4. Now, the way I'm looking at it from here, Carter, is the remaining schedule. which interestingly, UConn has the easiest schedule by quite a large margin. They only have a home Seton Hall and a road Marquette left. And so they should be able to handle that, you would imagine. If they don't, they'll be in serious trouble. But if they do handle that, UConn will be still on the one line, I would imagine, no matter what, when we enter championship week for the Big East tournament. And then Arizona, I would say, has the second easiest. It's not easy because they play Kansas and Iowa State, but they're both at the McHale Center, where, Carter, you and I both know how hard it is to win there. If Arizona just handles their home business, again, tough challenges, and then they go finish up at Colorado, get that win, Arizona will be sitting pretty. But we look at the Michigan and Duke schedules, and I think that's where it gets very fascinating, mainly for Michigan because Duke's got the buffer with the win over Michigan. But Michigan's going to Illinois and Iowa back-to-back. Big test, obviously, tonight at Illinois, a much-watched game there. And the follow-up at Iowa would be fascinating if Michigan were to fall, to kind of relook at the data at that point, because Michigan did not get the Duke win last week. The Wolverines right now, you obviously still have a great resume, but their road wins are Purdue and Michigan State, and then their third best road win is TCU today. Obviously, if they win at Illinois or Iowa, that will supersede the TCU win as the third best, and it will just really maybe even solidify Michigan for good. But if they can't get those, you can start to poke some holes into a 4-loss Wolverine team. And then don't forget, they've rematched Michigan State in the finale. So all 3 games for Michigan will at least be challenging and heavyweight games in terms of bracketology. And then Duke, I'll at least point out, they got to play Virginia, a hungry Virginia team. It's at home. So Duke should be okay. But if Virginia can play perfect, it could get interesting. They've got the North Carolina game there as well at the very end of the year. And they mix in a road trip to nearby NC State, which could be a wild environment. Anything could happen there. So Duke's not exactly home free. They should be because we know how strong they are. But those are 3 capable teams they got to beat.
Lucas, how solidified is that top 3? Do you see any world where any of them fall out of being a 1 seed going into March?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to foresee that. If I'm going to make an argument for it, I have to you have to make an argument for it. Playing devil's advocate to really get off the line right now. And Rocco does mention the potential of Michigan's closing schedule, having to go at Illinois and at Iowa and then return home to face Michigan State. The thing with that is, should they struggle, which again, I'm not predicting they do, but should they struggle? And, part of that would mean Illinois gets a head-to-head win over Michigan, which potentially could play a factor. But I think the biggest key for these teams staying on the one line is there really just aren't that many teams capable of jumping over them right now. It's maybe 2, maybe 3 teams on the 2 line that have the potential to still get up there. But the list is shrinking of real contenders for number 1 seed. And the margin right now between the top 3 and probably UConn and then another margin down to 5 are widening.
Lucas, well, let me ask you this. I mean, you got UConn at 4 right now. Who do you think is right up next, hovering right behind them, and who has the best chance to maybe jump them?
Well, Iowa State's still my 5th team overall, and they obviously have 2 games coming up here that give them a chance. They get Texas Tech at home, and then they go at Arizona. I think the 1 seed conversation, barring UConn losing one of its final 2 games, of which I believe Ken Pom puts them at 84% or higher of winning either of those games, the odds are likely they finish 2-0. If that's the case, it would come down to how much the committee wants to weigh a conference tournament. And as we know, they're going to weigh it, but it is just one of 30 results or 2 of 30 results, however many games you play that week. Because these other teams in contention for the 1 line, whether it be Iowa State or Florida, or maybe even in Illinois, those teams are going to have better chances in their conference tournaments than UConn will. UConn's only chance for really a signature win in its conference tournament would be St. John's, a team it's already proven it can beat by 30, which doesn't really change a whole lot overall. So I think it's just really tough for those teams to get on the line without really kind of those teams have to implode at the top. Michigan would have to lose maybe 2 or 3 of its final games. Duke would have to really struggle. Arizona have to really struggle. UConn has more has a smaller margin than those 3 teams, but it's 2 games left. They should be able to comfortably handle more than the other 3 teams would be able to. Would you agree?
So, well, look, Rocco, let me ask you this, where you have UConn at the 4 with their easier schedule remaining compared to the rest. yes, let's say they win out their games they should win and everything, and even maybe win the Big East tournament. Does that automatically solidify them as a 1 seed? Like, let's say Iowa State goes and knocks off some marquee wins and maybe makes a bit of a run in Kansas City. Would they jump UConn even though UConn doesn't fall at all?
Yeah, there's certainly no guarantee. There's always an opportunity to supersede a team. But we're in a situation right now on February 27th, Carter, where there's not much runway left to go. Most of the wins and the resume and the schedule has been deposited into the bank. And so with that being said, if UConn gets to the finish line with 3 losses, that's going to look great no matter who wins against who at this point. But you look at the teams UConn beat. I mean, they just beat St. John's, so they got that one. They've got the neutral Florida. If it ends up being them versus Florida, you almost have to take them on the head-to-head, especially on a neutral court, especially when you look at the fact that UConn also won at Villanova, also won at the Fog, beat BYU, not nothing, obviously. So they have a great resume in terms of top-end wins. The committee's already given us some hints that they love that element more than others. So I think UConn would be in good shape based on where we're at and what we understand today. But I think when it comes to Iowa State, Arizona, that's where it gets interesting because they will play each other at McHale. Yeah. If the Cyclones go into their building and get that win, then it's probably time to start poking some holes into the Wildcats. And if they are viable still for a 1 seed at that point. So that's, I think, the more interesting saga to watch, plus the Michigan remaining schedule, as Lucas and I both talked about. If they were to lose 2 of those 3, I think then Michigan gets interesting as well. Florida, the way they're playing, if they just keep winning and winning and winning, they're a nice option as a plan B for the committee. Yeah. But until we get 1 or 2 of these teams to really slip up, Florida's probably stuck as a 2.
It's hard when the head-to-head results we can look at. It's hard when the head-to-head results we talk about, like Iowa State could get Arizona, Illinois could get Michigan. The problem is those teams right now seem so far ahead of the rest of the pack as at the top. We're like, I don't know how much really their metrics would even make a huge difference, or their loss total is still smaller than those teams. I think it's going to be tough. Where like the easiest argument is if a team on the 2 line could knock off UConn, but that's not on the schedule. So I think we're going to more than likely see these 4 teams when it gets down to the stretch. To Rocco's point, the runway is it's running out of time.
Lucas, the last question I have before we go to break is one team I wanted to bring up is Houston. We've seen them implode in a sense, and as of late. Where do you see Houston right now? Can they, get to the top of the 2 line? Is the 1 seed completely out of the picture at this point for them, or are they falling down to the 3 for you?
They fell down to a 3 to me this morning. Kind of ever since then, it's been on my mind debating the last 2 seed versus the top 3. And they're still kind of in that conversation to be back on the 2 seed line for me. Their numbers are better than I thought they were upon like reevaluating, especially when I compared it to Illinois and Purdue. Like their resume metrics are better than Illinois still, and their quality metrics are better than Purdue. So you can certainly make an argument for them to be still on the 2 line. I do think that the 1 seed has probably gone away as a possibility. They've never really had the top end wins of these other teams at the top of the seed line, like Michigan, Arizona, Duke, and UConn have. They don't have the elite wins. And now they're out of opportunities to add them in the regular season. They finish Colorado at home, Baylor at home, at Oklahoma State. None of those are super needle movers, so it would come down to the conference tournament. At that point, it's probably going to be too little too late to get to the 1 line. But the Cougars can certainly still play their way. Could not just play their way up. They might already be a 2. I mean, what I say isn't what the committee would say. They could be a 2 in the committee's eyes right now, and it would just be staying on that line versus moving up. But a 2 is certainly still realistic for Houston. I think a 1 would be difficult to get to.
I love it. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about the bubble, who's in, who's on the wrong side, and all that right after this on Field 68.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app. You sign up using bonus code FIELD. You deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. If you're not a member of the Field of 68's On3 community, make sure to go check us out. Get access to all of Jeff Goodman and Rob Dauster's written content, including coaching carousel breakdowns, info on who is and isn't entering the transfer portal, insider recruiting information from none other than Joe Tipton, X's and O's analysis of all the teams in college basketball, and access to our message board community. A 7-day trial costs you $1. The Field of 68 on 3. Get the scoop.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. And now we're talking about the bubble. Who's in, who's out, who's on the wrong side, who's got work to do. Lucas, let's start with you. Let's start with the last four in for you in the bubble right now.
All right, so my last four in today are TCU, Auburn, California, and Indiana. I will start with saying I can't dislike this much more than I do. I had a really hard time. TCU, I feel pretty good about. The WAB's not perfect at 45. The predicted metrics are low, but their elite wins, I think, got a boost, not only from being great in the first place, but got a boost when the selection committee met for the bracket preview and discussed, in particular, their comments about UConn's 3 best wins being better than Houston's 3 best wins. If that's a conversation at the top of the bracket, that continues to be a conversation towards the bubble. I like the way TCU compares, given its elite wins. As for the last 3 in, compare those to my first 6 out, and there's a whole lot of pick 3 of 9 and pick 3 of 9 right now. There's not a lot to love about these resumes. I think the case for Auburn, obviously, they have really good wins, which compared to a lot of teams, 13 losses. I think this might be simplifying it too much. I think a 15-loss Auburn team gets in the field. I think a 16-loss Auburn team doesn't. I'm pretty thankful for Cal's win against SMU to kind of put a team in the field that, at least has a better collection of kind of overall stuff. They're up to 43 in the WAB. Their predicted metrics are low, but 4 quadrant run wins helps to buoy some. No bad losses. Indiana, I don't particularly love as a selection either. But you got to find 68 right now. And I think this has gone from maybe a week or two ago. I said that I thought it was a pretty strong bubble. It's gone from a pretty strong bubble to I don't really love a whole lot here. But Indiana is going to have opportunities to fix its issues. They still get Michigan State at home. They still get Ohio State on the road. Those are big opportunities for them to potentially fix what right now is a 2-10 record in quadrant 1. It's a 4-11 record against the upper 2 quadrants. There's a lot of questions here with IU. I went with the quality of their top win as a reason to be in the field. But you look at any of my first 6 teams out right now, there's a gap from 6 to 7 and the rest of the bubble after that. But I think between these last 3 teams, especially Auburn, Cal, and Indiana, and the first 6 out, which I'm sure we'll discuss later, you're splitting hairs between those teams. And it wouldn't surprise me if my 6th team out was in over Auburn, my 3rd to last team in right now. So it's very, very tight on those lines. I do think TCU, I have a touch ahead of the rest of those.
Yeah, I see that 15-13 Auburn record, and I just want to puke on screen right now how gross that is to look at. But anyhow, Rocco, let's get to your last 4 in. Who you got?
Yeah, so I got to preface this by letting everybody know San Diego State Aztecs today, it's going to probably shuffle again after this weekend, but today they would be the number 1 seed in the Mountain West tournament. They have the tiebreaker over Utah State, and they are in my field. So just know that. And they, of course, just to remind the audience, we have to remind them every year, if you are an automatic qualifier, you are not going to the first 4. This is for the last 4 at-large bids. And so let's get into it. So Santa Clara, we will start with the Broncos. We mentioned them at the top of the show. They're still 14-3 in the WCC. They remain
closer than I thought.
What's that?
So I was like, our last 4 in are closer than I thought they would be. We got 2 of the same 4.
Oh, okay. I got you. But yeah, so Santa Clara, 14-3 in the WCC. I think they're still a quality option, for the committee because they're 4-3 in their top 2 quadrant road opportunities. They were 4-2 before the St. Mary's lost. Certainly nothing wrong with losing at St. Mary's. Of course, the Broncos would have loved to play a tighter game than they did, getting beat by 19 like that. But as it shakes out today, despite the loss to Loyola Chicago back in December, this team has been as steady as a bubble team as you will find from a consistency standpoint. And the WCC, I think it's the 6th or 7th best league this year. It's still difficult to go to some of the places and win the way they did, and that does add up. They have, like I said, those 4 quadrant 2 road wins. TCU, as Lucas did a great job touching on, I think they were the most boring bubble team this week, which is interesting because TCU's been the wildest team all year. So they picked a fun week to be boring. Just beating Arizona State at home was really all the doctor ordered for now. And they get a little bit closer to the inside, but still plenty of work to do there. Still plenty of bad losses to nitpick at. Yep. And so the Horned Frogs probably will be on the bubble till the bitter end, but in a good spot, at least for one day. California, much like Lucas, I agree. That win over SMU was money. Really had to have it because you look at the converse option, which would have been losing to SMU. There would have been no more chances to beat a team in the field. Also, you would add a home loss, which is never good. Now you look at the data and you look at the way the Miami Hurricanes have been playing lately, and that road win is aging really, really well, like a Napa wine over here. And so they got the win at Miami. I think it's the best road win out of a lot of these bubble teams. Certainly a better road win than Virginia Tech's Clemson win or Indiana's road win at UCLA. So again, going with that mentality that the committee gave us on the bracket preview, a top of the resume wins. Cal's got a better top of the resume win at this moment than teams like Virginia Tech and Indiana. And last but not least, this one was hard because the Buckeyes don't grade out as a tournament team in the way I look at it. However, you got to pick the 37 at-large teams, and they were just, I guess, slightly acceptable with their 3 wins at home versus potential tournament teams. UCLA clearly in the field right now. Wisconsin's the headliner for Ohio State. They've trickled together a couple different quad 2 road wins in the Big Ten. Certainly nothing substantial above the bubble. They had their chance to fix that at Iowa. They got beat by 17. So again, it was tempting to put Virginia Tech in. We'll talk about them in a minute, but I did hang on with the Buckeyes for today.
Shout out Mark Madsen and the Cal Golden Bears getting that win against SMU. What a huge one, and what a turnaround it's been for Mark Madsen and company over there in Berkeley. Moving on to the consensus first 4 out, or the last 4 in here, we got Santa Clara, Cal, Auburn, and Ohio State. Rocco, anything to add here?
Yeah, I mean, looking at I have to address Auburn. I hate having to do it every time we're on the show, but it is what it is. I mean, they're 15-13, and honestly, here's what's going to happen: they're going to play LSU and Ole Miss. If they go 1-1 in those games, they're staying out for me. If they go win those 2 games, they're probably going to be in forever because then they can go to Alabama and lose. And let's say they do go 1-1 against Ole Miss and LSU, but they can go make up for that with a win at Alabama. So still plenty of mulligans left for Auburn to play with, or at least one more mulligan to play with. And what will end up happening is if they finish 2-1, one way or the other, they're going to get to the finish line at 17-14. Even if they get knocked out of Nashville right away from the SEC tournament, they're going to be 17-15 with a road win at Florida. That's really going to be enough for most of the committee members to put them in. And I'll just be flat out honest about it. But if they take loss number 15 here before we get to the SEC tournament, I think they're drawn dead and they're on their way to the declining an NIT bid.
Lucas, anything to add on the consensus last 4 in?
Well, it sounds like Rocco is on board with my 15-loss Auburn gets in, 16-loss Auburn gets out situation. The thing I'll add on the consensus the thing I'll add on our consensus last 4 in to me was Santa Clara was my 5th to last team in, just one spot above the last 4 in for me. Santa Clara was my first free 11 seed of Dayton.
Okay, nice.
I like it.
One scenario I do want to paint before we move on to the wrong side of the bubble is like, knock on wood, let's make sure this doesn't happen. But like, say there's like a 2-loss Miami, Ohio, and then we've got this like 16-loss Auburn team. Like, who would get in at that point?
Nobody with 16 losses is getting in, Carter. If not, I might have to resign. It's never happened in history, and it's not a good time to start. I know the SEC's got a magical potion in the room to make everything happen that they need to happen and get all 11 of these hopefuls in the field. So if it's going to happen, it's going to be with that league, but I'm certainly not projecting it.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to the first 4 out. These teams are on the wrong side of the bubble. Rocco, let's go with yours. Who are your first 4 out?
Yeah, so first 4 out, again, to me, if you're out, you're out. So it's not really in any particular order. All of these teams can help themselves if they go get a good win or a big win. But I'll start with USC. USC by the road win actually had some leverage in the exercise because of the win at Wisconsin. And so that makes them continuously interesting. It's also the first time, they've been banged up all year. So the injury discussion for USC will be heavily discussed with the committee, I would imagine. They do have a home win over Indiana, which I guess if you're comparing the two means something, probably not a lot. And they've taken on, a little bit of water here with some of the home losses, losing at home to Oregon, losing at home to Northwestern, losing at home to Washington, all teams not dancing or close to dancing. But USC on the road, again, like traditionally, what you do on the road goes a long ways. They are still 9-6 away from the Galen Center. That's actually pretty impressive. Scheduling that Eric Musselman tribute game at San Diego was a tricky way to help their road record, but nicely done by the schedulers down there in Tinseltown. But yeah, so they've won at Oregon, they've won at Minnesota, they've won at Penn State. Those are all quad 2. It means something when you're breaking down the bubble into fine parts. And then the next team on the list is Virginia Tech. Like that's the team that benefited probably the most of the bubble crumbling this week to get back into the first 4 out, at least an interesting option with their road win at Clemson. Unfortunately, that has not aged very well at all. Clemson's playing their worst basketball of the year. They're down to a 9 seed on my site. And I think that has been the problem because if Clemson was still a top 5 seed or a 6 seed, that would impress us a little bit more. Virginia Tech has an acceptable enough resume with wins over California and, of course, the triple overtime win over Virginia. They remain a very interesting team to me because of the way they've lost 3 different heartbreakers, namely the SMU 60-foot buzzer beater. If Virginia Tech can just finish close to the cut line, they might get argued into the field. That'll be fun to track as we go forward. Then I have VCU, who, by the comparable numbers available to us and to the committee, things like the WAB and the metrics, they're suggesting VCU has done a lot this year. They've earned a lot. The problem is in their 5 opportunities against tournament level competition, they're 0-5. It's the identical record to Indiana State a couple of years ago when Indiana State got 5 opportunities, went 0-5. Sycamores got left home. I have a feeling that's just where the Rams sit right now. But we'll see if it improves. If they get into the top 40 of WAB at some point, that'll be very interesting because everybody in the top 40 of that tool was in last year. Again, I don't want our committee ran by tools, but when you're a team from the Atlantic 10, it's really hard to compare resumes between a team like VCU and a team like Ohio State, for example. And then last but not least, Indiana. Lucas did a good job explaining their situation. In my opinion, with them, the way I evaluate them, they've beaten Purdue and Wisconsin at home, nice wins. They've won at UCLA, good enough road win, but they're 1-7 in road games against the top 2 quadrants. That's a poor record. You'd want that one win to be against a team at least wearing white in the projected field. UCLA is not that. And 4-8 overall away from Bloomington. Not good either. And again, I had them in on Monday, but that home loss to Northwestern completely throws the whole thing out of balance for me. Now 4-11, I believe, against the top 2 quads, maybe 4-12. Actually, correct. I might not have updated that. So it's just too much to stomach right now. Indiana's got to play their way back in, and unfortunately, they don't have a big road game left. So they got to beat Michigan State at home this Sunday and then take it from there.
Lucas, who are your first 4 out?
Yeah, so to continue my point from earlier, it was really my first 6 out were all in really strong consideration for the field. So obviously 4 of those are in my first 4 out, being Ohio State, USC, New Mexico, and VCU. We talked about Ohio State a little bit already. They're a team I've talked about for the last couple weeks is kind of a control their own destiny bubble team. As far as they're 1-10 in quadrant 1, but like they've had chances. They just lost at Michigan State, at Iowa. They still get Purdue at home. It's not a quadrant 1 game, but they still get Indiana at home as well. The opportunities are still there for Ohio State to control their own destiny, but it's just really hard to overlook 1-10 in quadrant 1 when the one win is on the road over number 69 of the net Northwestern, who's not a tournament team. Rocco already hit on USC plenty. I think we're in good shape on the USC discussion. New Mexico State, I mean, it's the Nevada loss on the road, maybe not altogether super crushing, but down to 52nd in the WAB. But they are 11-7 against the upper 3 quadrants, which is something you can point to as a reason for inclusion compared to some of these teams that are closer to 500 or below it. In that they do have a win over the field right now for me, beating Santa Clara at home. And then, continuing this first 4 out, they beat VCU on the road, which is certainly one that carries some weight in this bubble conversation for me. Moving to VCU last, Rocco already talked about VCU. They're up to 48th in the WAB right now. They do finish at Dayton, which, while not a tournament level team, it is a pretty significant opportunity for them to improve their metrics should they win that game on the road. I think we talked fairly commonly about how VCU's game on the road at St. Louis felt like a make or break game. And obviously they lost that game, but we've progressed past that, and they're still in the mix here. I have them slightly ahead of Virginia Tech, which is my 5th team out, in part because when I get to their head-to-head comparison, you look at VCU's higher in wins above bubble, it's higher in overall resume average, it's higher in overall predictive average, and they beat Virginia Tech on a neutral site. That head-to-head comparison gave VCU the edge to be my 4th team of the first 4 out right now. But to kind of continue into the teams I gave some serious consideration to, Virginia Tech is 5th, and San Diego State is my 6th team out as virtue of being the lowest of wins above bubble, 53rd of the teams that's in that 6th for me.
Continuing on, let's go to the consensus first 4 out here. We have USC, Indiana, Virginia Tech, and San Diego State here. Rocco, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think we touched on the first 3. I definitely went into the weeds on Virginia Tech. It's a good point that VCU handled Virginia Tech down at the MTE they played in. I think it could matter. It could help VCU. I think the Commonwealth, rooting for the Commonwealth, if you're a Rams fan, could really bolster VCU's hopes of getting an at-large. It's another path for them. Should these 2 teams, continue to play well. Virginia Tech hasn't done anything spectacular. They were mainly brought back into the discussion because of bubble failure during the midweek. So that's been interesting. And San Diego State, as it pertains to an at-large candidacy, still has plenty of work to do after falling to Grand Canyon last week and then falling again to Colorado State. But a huge opportunity in the pit. Basically, the next 2 Mountain West hopefuls after Utah State are the Aztecs and the Lobos, getting after each other on Saturday. So whoever wins that game will take a hard look at the winner of that come Sunday morning.
Lucas, anything to add on San Diego State here?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the bubble watch before they beat Utah State earlier this week. I wrote their section of it before then. And at that point, they were on the outside looking in, but it was easy to point to, next 3 games were all quadrant 1 opportunities. They got the first one beating beating Utah State. But then they go on the road here. These next 2, they go at New Mexico, at Boise State. Their opportunities to play their way into the field. If they're able to be successful there, I think one of the things that's tricky with it is when we talk about wins above bubble, the margin between San Diego State, which was 53rd in wins above bubble before it beat Utah State, and 52nd at that time, was so significant that even beating Utah State at home, San Diego State stayed 53rd in wins above bubble, which is one of the lower numbers currently under consideration for me. This is only one of the first few years we've had wins above bubble in the conversation, but the committee has stressed it pretty hard. So it's a number I'm giving a little bit more look at than maybe I otherwise would compared to the other 5 non-net metrics on the team sheet. So that is a tad concerning for San Diego State, but to the point of them staying at 53, they lowered the margin in the mix there. So there's the opportunity now, if they get these 2 road wins, or at least one of them, to make a push closer to the cut line for me. Certainly a team that's still in the conversation, as I discussed. Really, it was 9 teams for 3 spots for me when I was discussing with myself in my room last night and this morning.
Talking to a mirror, like, I think this team needs to get in. I don't know. Yeah, but anyhow, moving on to the consensus.
Back on.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to the consensus next 4 out. We've got VCU, New Mexico, and Lord have mercy, they will never leave this graphic ever. The Seton Hall Pirates, and then Oklahoma State. I think Seton Hall, they're settling down here. They're buying a house. They're getting some roots. They're going to have kids. Like, they will be here on this graphic forever, Rocco.
Yeah, that's fine, but if you're out, you're out. I mean, it's just, Dagan's amusement, our producer. Shout out to Mr. Hughes, but unfortunately the damage has been done. Losing to DePaul at home is something not many can stomach. Certainly not myself.
I think things could change this weekend. Things could change on Saturday. Lucas, anything to add on the next 4 out here?
Yeah, I mean, when you're going to say that the Big East has been short on opportunities this season, it's not short on opportunities for Seton Hall down the stretch. There's really only 2 real needle-moving teams that you can beat in the Big East this year. There's only 3 tournament-level teams, which basically puts you at 6 opportunities to win a tournament game in regular season league play. And 33% of those opportunities are still left for Seton Hall. They go at UConn, at Xavier, and then they get St. John's at home in their finale. So, like, if there's a team that can make a jump from pretty far out of consideration right now to in the field, it is Seton Hall. They've given me very little confidence to believe they're going to beat the Huskies and the Red Storm on top of winning on the road at Xavier over these last 3 games. But that is kind of what this picture has been for a lot of bubble teams. I think Seton Hall is pretty clearly 7th right now. They're behind my first 6 teams out, but they're definitely ahead of the collection of whether it be Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, whoever you want to throw there as these teams that have opportunities left. Seton Hall is the one with the closest, but I think it's going to be difficult to get there. But the schedule affords opportunities more than you normally would have in the Big East this season.
Yeah, and to your point, Lucas,
absolutely.
I also just want to point out Oklahoma State's remaining schedule, because I think it's pretty important. They're going to Cincinnati and UCF for 2 quad 1 road games. Obviously, UCF's securely in the field, wearing white right now on opening day of the NCAA tournament, I might add. And then they host Houston on the last day of the year, which is a massive Gallagher-Iba Arena game that could put them in the field. I mean, so everything, I think, even though the Cowboys are 7th or 8th out right now, I think everything's still in front of them. If they can whip out 3 in a row, I'd be 4 in a row by then because they just beat West Virginia. Pay attention to the Pokes, because this could get interesting.
Hey, and the calendar turns to March this weekend. Anything can happen. Things get crazy in the month of March. That's When we come back, we'll talk about the risers, the fallers, and games to watch right after this on the Field of 68.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, you sign up using bonus code FIELD, you deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Are you trying to follow everything happening in college basketball? It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for recruiting news, game analysis, portal updates, and much, much more. For just $50 a year, you get access to the same information that your favorite coaching staff is subscribed to. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help. Make sure you subscribe today.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Carter Bond, joined by Lucas Harkins and Rocco Miller. Fellas, let's talk about the risers, the fallers, and game to watch. We'll start with the risers. Rocco, you mentioned them at the beginning as your winner of the bracket so far this week with UCF. Lucas, your thoughts on UCF after this week?
Yeah, there's been a pretty large disparity here between bracketologists. It's not like I usually don't look at anybody else until mine's done. But I've seen some pretty wide ranges between like a 7 and a 10 seed for the last week or two. Obviously we don't talk here on any really those middle seeds very often. Usually we talk 1 seeds in the bubble. So it's good to hear where Rocco had UCF as wearing a home jersey in the last segment. I'm in agreement with that. I have UCF up to the 7 seed line right now. It's hard to really foresee what the committee will do with them. The last 10 minutes of the game against BYU have been kind of a headache for me with regards to UCF, as the difference for them all year has been a gigantic gap between their resume metrics and predicted metrics. I kind of thought if they were going to beat BYU by 30 or 35 or 40, like that could have finally started to even out some, and then they give up 40 points in the last 10 minutes, and that becomes what I think was a 13-point final margin. As a result, the difference is still gigantic. They're averaging 23.7 across resume metrics, 48.3 across the predicted metrics. So like you say, your resume says you're a 6 seed, your predicted metrics say you're a 12 seed. Where on earth do you go with that? I lean in favor of valuing what they've actually done, which is win games. And I put them up to a 7 seed for that.
Yeah, the score definitely lied in that game, but that's okay. Rocco, anything else to add on the Knights?
Well, yeah, I just think it was so big for them to show that they could not. They beat Kansas at home earlier this year for kind of a big marquee win, but that happens all the time. You beat teams at home, even for non-tournament teams, it happens. So for UCF to go on the road and beat a team that's projected a top 5 or 16 seed, obviously BYU more of a 6 nowadays, but is really important to their resume, because now you get compared to teams like Iowa and NC State and St. Louis and Utah State, and it's very easy to say, okay, well, UCF's done something more substantial than that list of teams. And now the Knights are starting to win those comparisons on the merits instead of even having to worry about the numbers as much. And obviously on the resume side, they've always been strong because what they've been able to accomplish, and with a limited amount of losses, it has been impressive, but they still had to establish themselves as a team that could compete at the highest level and go do it on the road. And now they've done that. I think it's important from here that they don't get fat and happy and take all these flowers and fall apart, because they do have BYU, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State still to go. 2 of those are home games. You take home losses and you undo a lot of good that you've achieved. So it's important UCF stays the course and closes this thing out. And I think they will be looking good to wear white on the first day of the tournament. But yeah, I think even if they did fall apart and lose all 3 of these games coming up, they still finished 20-10. They're in the field. They're probably not in a good seeding position, but they would still be a tournament team.
The next riser I want to mention here is UCLA. They get the awesome buzzer beater win against Illinois, and then they go out and whoop USC. Lucas, thoughts on UCLA? Mick Cronin, I mean, hey, someone raised his voice at them, and all of a sudden they're turning things around.
Well, I think the thing for UCLA, as I've gotten to kind of digest them a little bit more with this nice streak, is that I'm not comparing the wins like head to head. They're not equal, but they kind of feel like Wisconsin of a month ago light. Like they didn't win at Illinois. They didn't win on the road, but they now have a home win over Purdue and a home win over Illinois, where like those kinds of wins over 2 fringe 3 seed, depending on where you feel where Purdue lands right now. Like it's 2 really elite wins that you compare to the rest of the bubble, where if you're going to have these conversations of what'd you do at your best versus what the other team do at their best, UCLA is going to win a lot of those arguments. And obviously adding a home win over USC, over another bubble team, it pushes them further into the field for me. I have UCLA pretty solidly on the 10 seed line. There was a pretty decent gap for me between my 3rd 10 seed and the rest of the teams on the bubble. And they were on the right side of that kind of imaginary line that I drew in my brackets. So I feel better about where UCLA stands right now. Obviously, how could you not after their last 2 games? But it's not an easy closing schedule either. They still have to go at Minnesota, at USC. Winning on the road's never easy. And when you say their only home game is against Nebraska, projected top 4 seed, there's obviously still potential for danger there, but I like what they've done recently, and they've put themselves with a little bit of a margin.
Rocco, thoughts on the Bruins?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have UCLA in the same spot for today, so that part I do agree with, but I don't agree with that I'm all the way sold on the resume. I mean, like I said, winning big home games happens all the time, and their best road win is still Washington. It's a quad 1 win, but Washington's not a tournament team. They did win at Oregon and Penn State, but away from Westwood, that 3-8 mark is not strong. And we got to see what they do against Nebraska at home. That's another opportunity to just add a fourth piece of evidence from Westwood. But also going to USC, they were clearly the better team than USC the other night. I watched the whole game, outclassed USC in every fashion, won the game by 19. I think when they go across town, they have a good chance to do that again. USC is a little out of sorts right now, but that's still 2 weeks away, so it's not like we know exactly what that game's going to look like. And then at Minnesota, you would like to see them get that because, like I said, the 3-8 road away from home record is not good compared to the other bubble options. In fact, I think it's arguably the worst record that I see here on my board. So UCLA still, you could pick them apart if you really tried. The other thing you could pick apart too, I think it would be discussed if they get really close to the cut line, is both the Purdue and Illinois wins were at the buzzer. You had Billadunians against Purdue, and you had coast-to-coast ties, Edney redo by Donovan Dent against Illinois. So those easily could have been losses, one shot away from being losses. And so it's really not exactly convincing.
Rocco, our next risers, the Missouri Tigers, and Lucas, I believe, briefly mentioned them earlier on in our first segment. They get their wins over Vanderbilt and Tennessee, obviously had the loss at Arkansas. Thoughts on the Tigers?
Yeah, sorry, was that Missouri?
Missouri, yes.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, Missouri in a much stronger position with that Tennessee win during the midweek. It gives them a 6th win against the field. They've already got the road wins at Kentucky, at Texas A&M. They add another one at South Carolina during league play. Makes their road record decent, especially compared to the bubble. Missouri looks stronger than most of the pack right now after you get into the 9s and below. Due to all that evidence, they beat Florida, Vandy, Tennessee, all at home, regardless of how you feel at Auburn. Like Lucas said very beautifully, a lot of people have beat Auburn this year. But the only thing left for Missouri to resolve, if there's anything, is the away from home overall record. Still just 4-7, not exactly great. Still better than UCLA. But because they have 2 of them at Kentucky and at Texas A&M, I think Mizzou should be fine going forward.
Lucas, thoughts on Missouri?
Yeah, I think some of the same points I made with UCLA, just better. I think they have obviously 2 really good home wins like UCLA did, but they actually have a 3rd really good home win now that they get Tennessee at home. They also have 2 road wins over the field. They beat Kentucky on the road. They beat Texas A&M on the road. They've moved up to the 9 seed line for me. They're my last 9, but they have moved up to the 9 for me. They're a team where when you look at their resume, it's one where you have to remind yourself that, of the metrics that are on the team sheet, if the committee follows through on the net being for quadrant rankings and not as a ranking of your individual quality, that makes them look a little better. They're 58th in the net, which is rather low, but they're 35th in web. Their quality metrics are now up into the top 50. Obviously, of the quality metrics, the quality wins that I've already mentioned for them, but also to the point of kind of UCLA, but in a better position. It's not easy to win on the road. They go at Mississippi State and at Oklahoma, and then their home game is Arkansas. Also not an easy game. So a team that I feel pretty good about right now, but again, a schedule that's not super forgiving down the stretch for opportunities that could drop them further.
The last riser we have here is Georgia, who got a win at Kentucky and beat Texas at home. Rocco, thoughts on the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, they seem pretty secure. They've also got a win at Missouri from earlier this year by 2 points. And so, again, a team that's got a couple pieces of road evidence really raises the floor of how far they can fall. The other thing you like about Georgia, I guess they do have the home Ole Miss loss. Outside of that, not a bad loss to speak of. Overall, they're 10-8 against the top 2 quads. 10-9 when you throw in that Ole Miss home loss. But they don't have a great strength of schedule. That would be one thing you could pick apart if Georgia loses out. But I think overall they've pretty much done enough. They're not really at too much risk of a losing record. They do have to go to Mississippi State and Oklahoma, but to fall at those two places, they're quad 1 road games. Mississippi State might be fringe quad 2, but still not a bad loss. And then they finish up at home against Arkansas. Georgia should be safe, but let's see how it plays out.
Lucas, anything to add on the Bulldogs?
It's interesting. I'm actually lower on Georgia than both Missouri and UCLA on my board. But they are, when I mentioned earlier, there's a cutoff between that third 10 for me and the rest of the bubble. They are still above that line for me. So I still feel pretty good about where they're at. We've reached the point of the season where you feel pretty good about 10 seeds, which obviously can change over the last 3 games, but that's how much things have shrunk over the last week or two. That now you see the margins get bigger between teams on the 9 line and the top of the 10 line versus the cut line. Like when you compare what Georgia has done, for instance, versus what my last team in Indiana has done, there is a much larger gap there than there was a week or two ago between a mid-10 seed and my last team in. So I think that Georgia's put itself into a relatively good position, in particular because of those road wins that Rocco mentioned over Missouri and Kentucky. Also have a home win over Auburn, like most teams seem to have at this point in the season, albeit in overtime, I believe. But I think they're in relatively decent shape right now. They get the next 2 games at home. One of them is against South Carolina. That's a must-win game to stay in feeling pretty good. But if they get that game, I'll feel pretty good about them moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about that. I misspoke. I was reading you earlier the Missouri remaining schedule. So yeah, Georgia's remaining schedule is home South Carolina and Alabama, and they do actually go to Mississippi State as well.
Correct.
But I apologize to the audience for that.
No, not a concern. Moving on, the Fallers. And this team, they built up so much goodwill over the last month and a half or so, winning so many games in a weak Big East, and then they just get the doors blown off of them against UConn by 32. Rocco, thoughts on St. John's?
Disappointing for performance, really kind of head scratching in some ways. But again, it's one piece of a 31 game story that everybody gets to tell. Obviously, it was an important piece because you don't get to play the UConns of the world very often. But the one thing you could pick apart for St. John's is that outside of the road win at Villanova, you're searching all over their resume for a tournament level win. They're hard to find. They also have the home loss to Providence they have to own forever. But this team, until that night, they were 8-0 before the UConn game in games on the road against the top 2 quads. That's an extremely strong record. Nobody can beat it, obviously. And that helps hold up the resume quite a bit. And now they're 9-4 away from either Jamaica or Madison Square Garden. And they have a dominant records in all the quads. So they're going to win comparisons that way if they can, and anchor the resume with the road Villanova win from here. But again, there's chances for teams like North Carolina, for example, just passed them by beating Louisville at home. You could argue St. John's is better than North Carolina, but North Carolina is going to get way more chances to prove that now with Duke down the stretch and more. You also have a team like Wisconsin, who did lose this week, but if they finish strong, they have better road wins than St. John's. Louisville, I think they're out of chances, but yeah, so it's just like St. John's is now vulnerable to be passed, and they're stuck as a 6 seed instead of a really solid 5 seed before that game.
Lucas, thoughts on St. John's?
Well, I'm a Big East guy. I'm going to always be in favor of St. John's. But actually, I had St. John's as a 6 before the loss already. I had North Carolina jump them. They both had a win over a 1 seed at the time, both at home. North Carolina had the win over Duke, and St. John's had the win over UConn. But at this point, North Carolina has 5 wins over the field. In addition to the one over Duke, they got the one over Louisville as well. They also beat Virginia on the road. St. John's only has 2 wins over the field right now. It's UConn and Villanova on the road, which the Villanova win, obviously really nice to have a really good road result in there. But I already had St. John's in the 6. The nice thing about losing to UConn on the road is it is losing to UConn on the road, and pretty much everyone on the planet's going to do that this year, especially when UConn's healthy. So it didn't drop them for me. They stayed a 6. They're still my top 6 seed, actually. I think that they're probably going to stay there for me until the end of the buzzer, unless something different happens in terms of their own results or someone makes a big leap here down the stretch. I think on Selection Sunday, I'm probably going to have them as a 6. I know that's bold with 2 weeks left, or at least 3 weeks left, whatever it is, until we reach the final buzzer. But I think that they're pretty solidly in that range. You could see them jump to a 5 or as low as a 7, but I think right now I feel pretty good about them as a 6, in part because of there's a pretty significant drop off for me right now after the first 3 teams on the 6 line.
Another faller from this week, St. Louis. They have tough losses against at Rhode Island and at Dayton. Rocco, thoughts on St. Louis? We talked about them briefly earlier as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, much like I said earlier in the show, St. Louis is at a point now where it's going to be really hard to make up for those losses to Dayton and to Rhode Island on the road. They're a team right now with a remaining schedule. Their best opportunities at George Mason on the final day before the A-10 tournament. The A-10 tournament, unfortunately, runs late into the week to where the championship game's not till Sunday. And so most of which that tournament, even if they factor in their first game, is not going to be worth much, probably a quad 3 neutral type game. And so all of their merits will probably be for the purposes of this exercise will be deposited into the St. Louis bank. And I think beating Duquesne at home and beating Loyola Chicago at home is not going to move any needles either. And so now they're in purgatory, stuck in this 8-9 situation. Whether you have them an 8 or a 9 doesn't really matter. It matters for bracket matrix, but it doesn't matter for them because they're going to have to play a 1 seed in the second game if they're able to get out of there. So it's frustrating because we've seen how special this team can be, and to have 2 bad performances undo some of that hard work, it is frustrating because now there's really probably no way to make up for it unless there's like several 6s and 7s that lose probably multiple times, so St. Louis can repass them. Now, the good news on the positive side of all that is they're still 26th in Ken Palm. They're close to top 25 in a lot of the performance metrics. And we've seen in years past different junctures, the committee will start favoring some of those power numbers when it comes to the 7, 8, 9 range. And perhaps there's an angle for them to get to a 7. 6 is probably a bridge too far right now. But the 7 seed, as I've been doing the bracket exercise now for 5 or 6 weeks, the 7's important because there's almost a guarantee that at least one of the 7 seed locations will be right at home in St. Louis. If they're an 8-9, they're probably not going to be able to play at home.
Lucas, anything else to add on St. Louis?
Yeah, it would take Iowa State or Illinois to get to the 1 line for an 8-9 game to really be in St. Louis, unless I'm missing someone in there. So I think but I have St. Louis down to an 8 seed for me, right hinging on the 8-9 line. I certainly agree with all the points that Rocco's made on St. Louis. They probably the worst case scenario if you're the Atlantic 10, the last like week and a half of St. Louis results. Their seeding takes a hit, and they also defend home court against VCU, which might keep the Rams out of the at-large field as well.
Let's close up here. We got games to watch this weekend. Rocco, I'll start with you. We've got some great ones from Duke, Virginia, down to chaos tiebreakers in the Atlantic, in the A-Sun, or in the Sun Belt.
Chaos tiebreakers in the Sun Belt. It's going to be wild, man. We got the Stairway to 7 bracket coming out later tonight after these games end. And I know the top 7 teams are separated by 1 game. Texas State has the ability to get up to all the buys, the quintuple buy, with a win over Appalachian State. If they lose to Appalachian State, they can fall all the way to the 7 and have to play 3 days earlier because they have this Royal Rumble format where 2 new teams show up every day with buys, and all the way till there's 5 buys for the top 2 teams. Absolute chaos. Troy should be in good shape playing UL Monroe. That's about the only team I feel good about. I think everybody else has a chance to lose. That's going to be awesome. Outside of that, we have, I think, an interesting game with Kansas at Arizona for a lot of reasons. You see the next chapter of the Darryn Peterson saga. Arizona looking to, solidify themselves. They played pretty well last time out. So Kansas won at Texas Tech. So they've kind of been all over the map. They lost by 16 to Cincinnati at home. They've been amazing on Mondays, beating both Houston and Iowa State. So what Kansas are we going to get in that game? And then, of course, right over here, about 20 minutes from me, a monster game for WCC championship regular season with Gonzaga coming to St. Mary's. Always an amazing atmosphere. They'll be barbecuing all day long until the 7:30 tip-off out in front on the hill. St. Mary's 24 straight wins at home, a chance to get another share of the WCC championship. Gonzaga can win it outright. I think Gonzaga's locked up the 1 seed for the tournament either way, so should be phenomenal. But I think for bracketology, Gonzaga fighting for that last 3 spot, maybe the second to last 3 spot with Michigan State's big win last night, something we didn't touch on. So Gonzaga can get their best win of the conference, a quad 1A win at St. Mary's if they can get it. It'll be tough, but it's going to be a great game.
Lucas, games to watch this weekend.
Yeah, I'll stay out west. San Diego State at New Mexico is a pretty big one as well. Texas goes at Texas A&M. That's a couple pretty significant games there on the bubble. Virginia Tech goes at North Carolina, gives itself a chance there. Obviously, Saturday is always full of big games, but Sunday this week's pretty interesting on the bubble. Purdue goes at Ohio State, a big chance for Ohio State there. Indiana, also a big home chance. They get Michigan State. I've been writing about Belmont for a few weeks in my bubble watch. It's starting to gain a little bit of steam here as the rest of the bubble, especially the high major bubble, has struggled here late. Going on the road at Illinois State's an opportunity for Belmont to boost its numbers a little bit more. They still got some work to do. They're sub 50 in wins of the bubble, but not by much. I think they're 51st right now. If they can increase those numbers down the stretch, there's still a chance for the Bruins to be in the at-large picture. They're a team that, every year I pick usually a mid-major. Sometimes it's just non-power conference team that I'll call my bubble baby. Right now, at least for the time being, I'm going with Belmont this year as that team I'm really hoping to see continue to play well. They've been really, really strong. Obviously, my preference is that they avoid the bubble altogether and win their automatic bid. But they're a team that I think we've kind of forgotten about in the at-large picture because they're an easy team to just pencil in as auto bid every time we get into the bracketology right now.
I love it. Well, that does it from us. Make sure to follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening, and make sure to check out Field of 68 After Dark tonight, reacting to Michigan, Illinois. And then make sure to check out Fielding the 68 Mondays and Fridays, 5 p.m. Eastern, live on the YouTube channel, X, wherever you're watching this show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time.